Hello and welcome to this tutorial. In this tutorial going to go over the basic concepts of Portia AI. This time we're going to get hands-on. So we're going to illustrate the concepts as we code along. It's going to be a pretty simple example we walk through. By the end of it, you will have pulled some news headlines from file, extracted some information from it, and sent an email on. But the idea is to get you through all of the core concepts. If you'd been following from the previous videos, we did a more conceptual overview. If you're the kind of person who likes to get hands-on, then you would have jumped straight into this. But don't worry, I will recap all of the concepts as we go along. So I'm starting off from a blank project. Let's just do the very exciting tasks of getting the project set up first. And so the first thing we are going to do is pull up the terminal, and I'm using Poetry to initialize my project here. So I'm just going to initialize the project. Go yes, whatever. And no. Would you like developers to find it interactively? No, just go and figure that out for me. Continue generation, yes, right. So now that my TOML file is selected, you'll see here it says requires -311, which means that if I try and install the Portia SDK, I am going to get a message that says that it's not sure it's got the right Python version. And so what I need to do here is, you may not need to deal with that if you're using UV or something else. I'm a creature of habit. So I'm using VS Code and using Poetry, both of which I should probably change to catch up with the rest of my team. But let's just keep going. So go. I have now added the Portia SDK. The last thing I need to do, because VS Code is not the best, is make sure that I have the right Python interpreter, so that when I create my main and try to run it, it's using the right version corresponding to the one that's in the Poetry environment. So I'm just going to go like this and pick out specifically the executable that the virtual environment wants to use, which I can then make sure that I pull up in the thing. So let's create our main. There we go. And now I'm just going to go straight here, enter interpreter path, boom. All right, so now we are ready to write some code. So before I do that, I'm also going to create a .env file. This is because we use the .env file to pull all of the potentially relevant API keys. And before you get started, you are going to need an API key for one of the known LLMs. We should probably start talking about the product does. Portia allows you to build predictable, controllable, and authenticated AI agents in production. You can point it to any LLM you like. We are LLM agnostic. And so obviously you need to supply the API key for said LLM. So let's just go ahead and do that. I'm going to quickly pop in and get the API keys that I need. Now I have to warn you, this is not a jackpot, because this API key will probably have expired by the time you watch this video, so I wouldn't try and use it. You're not going to get much joy out of that. Anyways, so you put up your API key, and now we can actually start coding. So the first thing I'm going to do is a super basic example where I'm going to pull some information for some news headlines, and there's a particular piece of news that I'm after. So I'm going to add the text file that I want to get the news headlines from. These are some pretty epic KVWN Channel 4 News headlines that some of you might be familiar with. The Human Torch was denied a bank loan. The skeleton ran out of shampoo in the shower, and the arsonist had oddly shaped feet. So now that we are equipped with these compelling bits of news headlines, let us try and pull that information out and question it. So there's a bunch of imports that we need to get started. I usually always load .env because we're going to use it eventually. But let's start talking about more Portia-specific abstractions. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm definitely typing this fast and not copy-pasting from elsewhere, sarcasm, is we're setting up the config. Here I'm just going to use the default config, but in the config class of Portia, you can define a whole bunch of things. So you can, if we just sort of look at the default config itself, you can pick out the LLM model name, you can pick out, well, the LLM provider as well. You can pick out the storage class, whether you want to store in the cloud or not. In our case, if you have a Portia API key, stuff gets stored into the Portia cloud by default, and if not, it gets stored in your sort of runtime memory. You can make the storage class point elsewhere. You can make it point to disk, for example, and provide a folder where you want things like your plan run states and tool call logs to be saved over time. And there's a few other more options in config, which we will go over in a separate video. So now I'm instantiating my Portia client with this config. I'm also going to attach a default tool registry to it. We're going to see in a second that this is a dynamic tool registry that either pulls a bunch of the open source tools that come with our SDK, or if you have the Portia API key, also equips the Portia client with all of our cloud tools. So now is a good time to share that Portia has a cloud-hosted tool library. Since MCP is all the rage, I'm sure you're asking yourself this question. You can absolutely load tools from any MCP server and equip the Portia client with it, so that when it's doing its planning and execution further down the line, it can use those as well. So let's keep going. So the next thing I want to do is I want to give it a prompt and ask it to generate a plan. So what I'm going to do here is use the Portia.plan method. And this method takes a query and a list of tools. If you wanted to give it a list of tools, it's an optional parameter. It'll otherwise use the sort of superset of tools provided to the Portia client. You can also equip it with example plans. And what that means is if you wanted to snap the thinking of our planning agent when it's generating a plan to some good examples, you can sort of do that here. By the time this video releases, I'm pretty sure we will have launched a feature that essentially allows you to just upvote plans that you really like. And instead of you sort of statically providing example plans you like, they get picked out based on query similarity. Essentially a way for you to say, more of this, please, Mr. Planning Agent. Right, so the Portia.plan piece is going to invoke the planning agent, which is going to pick out all the tools that it was given, do some pondering, and produce a JSON formatted plan, which we're going to look at in just a second. Now, the other thing that I want to do while we're here is also run the plan once it's generated. So I will want to go Portia.runPlan, which takes a plan as an input. Now, because we pride ourselves on this ability to be on the spectrum of autonomy that you like, you could, for example, choose to iterate here on a plan a plan design conversationally with the planning agent to get to a place where you're comfortable with it. And once you are, you can sort of run the plan, which we'll talk about what that does in a second and how it works. If you have plans that you're confident with and just want to reuse, or you just want to jump straight into full autonomy type thing, you could have easily done Portia.run, which sort of immediately takes the query instead of explicitly going through the step of creating a plan first. Let's just stick with this one for now. Let me just clear my terminal so it's easier for you to see what's going on. And the thing that I'm asking Portia to help me with is pick up the news headlines from this file, confirm, extract some information. Here, if you remember from the news headline that the skeleton ran out of shampoo in the shower, we want to confirm how the skeleton's shower went and summarize with a personalized message. Note here, I'm sort of teasing it here and saying I want this to be signed with my name at the end. Obviously, you can tell there's nothing that says what my name is here. So let's have a look at what that does. And the idea is to show you sort of how the LLM copes with this sort of ambiguity, and in a second we'll see how we address that. So the first thing that happens is the planning agent is going to run for this query. And the first thing it's going to do is predictably produce a plan, and we'll get an output of that in a second. I'm using input instead of print, just a small detail, just so that it sort of stops scrolling through the command line dumps, and we can have a look at the plan together. So OpenAI is being a little bit slow today. Let's give it a second. And there we go. So let's have a look at what a plan is made of. So obviously it has a unique ID. The plan context is the query that we gave it. And this is the list of tools loaded into the default tool registry dynamically. Because I don't have a Portia API key yet, as you can see called out here, it only loaded the open source tools that are in our SDK. It's just a few tools that we built. We're continuing to add to it. They're just useful for you to get familiar with the SDK. Now, have a look at this. So a plan is a sequence of steps, right? And every step is a task. It takes a bunch of inputs that get extracted from the query and get extracted from previous steps. And it gives you an output at the end. You will notice that the tools are being selected dynamically. And you will also notice that in sort of following steps, the set of inputs can be outputs from previous steps, or they could be just information that was gleaned from the query, right? And so here, the first thing we're doing is extracting the news headlines, figuring out how the skeleton shower went based on the news headlines, and then writing that personalized message. And so you'll see it says LLM tool. That's just basically like a toolless agent, if you will, that just uses LLM smarts to complete a task. So you never need to hardwire agents in our case, right? You have a planning agent, and then you have archetypes of agents like an execution agent. And so when you run a plan, Portia takes that plan and will spin up an execution agent for every step. In another video, we'll talk a bit more about the other types of agents that help the execution agent. Like there's an introspection agent, for example, that makes decisions by assessing conditions to figure out if you should even run a step or not. And that's how we handle conditionals. Pretty cool stuff. So yeah, let's find out how this skeleton shower went, shall we? Now, next thing that's going to happen is we've now moved on to running the plan, right? And there you go. So step 0 is executed, which has fetched the information, the headlines, including the fact that the skeleton ran out of shampoo in the shower. Step 1, let's just wait for this thing to calm down. Here we go. Let's have a look. Step 1 is what I wanted to show you. In that step, after we invoked first in step 0 the file reader tool to get the information, step 1 was about analyzing that information and came out with the output that suggests that lots of brainy analysis. I mean, it would be nice if you had a bit more sense of humor here, Mr. LLM. But hey, look, it did conclude that the shower did not go as planned because the skeleton encountered an unexpected situation running out of shampoo. So that's great. And then it finally wrote a personalized message using the LLM tool as well. And notice how it signed this with like, oh, best regards, your name, because it's not equipped with a name, right? And the final thing that gets produced, which I asked it to do, which is dump the JSON. Here is the final plan run state. So every step here, every execution agent enriches the plan run state with its outputs. And so what you get at the end is this final plan run state, which has gotten to the final step. Steps are indexed from 0 onwards. So since it's 3 steps, that's step 2. The state is complete. And you see some interesting stuff here. So these are all the outputs from the various steps that are contained in variables. And you have a summarization tasks that happens here as well, just sort of about its findings and a final output. And this final output is, well, as we saw it earlier, that the shower did not go as planned for our bony friend. So happy days. At this stage, we now understand what a plan is, what a plan run is, how the plan run state is maintained and enriched by the execution agent. Let's stretch this a little bit more. What I would like to do is start involving the concept of an end user. When you're Deploying in production, you're going to have individual end users running multi-agent tasks. You'll want to be able to differentiate them. You'll want to be able to load information specific to each end user in production so that that gets captured into the runtime. And the way you do that is you use what we call the execution context. So I'm going to go ahead and import the execution context here. And the way you use execution context, we're working on this abstraction. We don't quite like the way it looks today, so bear with us, but this should be illustrative enough of how it works. The thing that you do is that you provide a with execution context where you get to define the end user. So for example here, let's just call this Momo's, that's me, YouTube demo. And I'm Munir, co-founder at Portia AI. And so now this information is going to get fed, and you can, this is key value pairs, by the way, you can add a whole bunch of stuff here. That is going to get fed to the planning agent and the execution agents as they are going through this process. And so not only is this useful for enriching context, which you'd hope gets picked up when signing the name, for example, it's also going to be useful when you start doing things that involve OAuth tokens and you're collecting OAuth tokens so that you can tell which token is for which end user on your end. So the other thing I want to do is I kind of want to stretch this a little bit more, and I want to say I don't want you to just sort of get information and write me a message here. I actually want you to send an email. And the way I do that is I'm just going to change the prompt a little bit. So by now you figured that I'm copying from another screen so that I save you watching me typing awkwardly. Yeah, so like there's really that final step where I'm saying summarize and send an email to hello@portialabs.ai, signed with my name at the end. Now, the only thing that's still missing here is the tool that it's going to need to send an email is obviously not in our open source SDK. We have it in our online tool catalog, our cloud tool catalog. So I need to add a Portia API key, and you'll see the change that that does to the default tool registry. So I'm just going to go ahead here and copy the Portia API key. Again, don't get too excited because this is not a key that you can use. Right, you go away. Yep. Right. So now that I've created the Portia or added the Portia API key, it's the default tool registry is going to be larger because it's going to pick stuff from our cloud catalog. Let's run this thing and see what happens in the current state of things. Spoiler alert, it's not going to run, and you'll see why in a second. Let's clear our terminal and do this one more time, and let's see what happens. So first thing you expect, of course, planning agent is going to run. And the first thing you're going to notice is our default tool registry is now going to be much bigger. It's going to take everything we have in our Portia cloud catalog, since there's a Portia API key. But it's still going to figure out in the plan, it's still going to pick the right tools for every step, as if by magic. But here, have a look. These are basically the tools that we have in our cloud. We're continuing to add more tools. I'm not sure how far down that path we will go, given the fact that we have MCP rising, and it's just going to become easier to get tools from elsewhere. But for now, we're continuing to add some of these tools. But more importantly, have a look at this plan, right? It is still able to figure out that it's going to use the file reader tool. It is still able to figure out that it's going to then analyze the news using the LLM tool. And then finally, it is able to actually pick the right tool, which is a Google Mail tool, to send an email. So what happens if you try and run this? Let's have a look. What is going to happen is the first two steps will look similar to what you've seen before, but when the execution agent that picks up step 2, sending the email, goes to work, it is going to get stuck. And why is it going to get stuck? Well, because the Gmail tool requires an authentication token. And so this is one of the things that Portia thrives on, which is this human agent interface. Our execution agents are able to raise what's called a clarification. It's a structured JSON object, and hand over control of the plan run to a developer. And so equipped with that clarification, you as a developer should be able to surface this in any UX form factor you like, any UX surface you like, for users to resolve before the plan run can resume. And so if we have a look at this plan run now, you will see that it exited with need clarification. So basically, it sort of did the plan run here, and it exited. And then when we print this plan run, it's just it stopped at need clarification at step number 2. And the outputs and the plan run state include the outputs from the previous steps, but it now also includes a clarification raised at step 2. We have different types of clarifications. Some are input clarifications if you're missing information or the person entered an invalid or tool argument that isn't allowed. We have multiple choice clarifications. You can imagine something like wanting to approve yes or no a step before it continues. And we have action clarifications, which typically is about clicking on a link. And when that link is clicked on, there's a listener of sorts that realizes the clarification is is resolved. So we'll dive into clarifications and how you can customize those for various user experiences in another post. Right now, because I have not specified anything for how I want to handle clarifications, the plan run just sort of stopped at needs clarification and exited. But you can now see what clarifications look like. This is our first foray into the human agent interaction with Portia. So, so how do we get out of this conundrum? Well, the way we get out of this conundrum is that we introduce clarifications into this plan run, and the way we do that is, again, you could test the plan run for clarifications, get all outstanding clarifications, do a while loop, and resolve them, and so on and so forth. We'll have a look at how to do that under the hood more manually later on. But for now, what I'm going to do is use the clarification handlers that we've already created in our SDK for handling execution, like handling clarifications in the command line interface. So I'm just going to add that here. I'm going to import that here, and the other thing that I need to do is to then make sure that I've added this into the execution hooks that are available to the Portia client, so that it now knows that, hey, look, if you encounter clarifications, you can use this execution hook to handle them. Again, we will go into the gory details of how you create those for other user experiences another time, but you basically will define your methods for handling different types of clarifications. In this case, it's something as simple as, like, you produce the clarification in the command line interface for someone to click on it. So now that I've added this, I'm going to give this plan run another try. And what you're going to see happen at this last step is the user will be prompted per the code that's in the execution hooks class to click on this link and authenticate. And the Portia client will be listening for the resolution of this to proceed. So let's give that another go and see what happens. So planning agent runs again, as we saw before. And once the first 2 steps are completed, we get to the third one. Instead of just exiting, the Portia client will use the execution hook to maintain state on the plan run and wait for the resolution of the clarification. So let's give that a second. I'll anticipate that question while we're waiting for this thing to cook. All of our tools, the Portia tools in the cloud, come with built-in authentication, which means that, like, when there's an action clarification, the authentication link you see comes out of a Portia authentication app with the relevant provider, for example, with Google. And so obviously with the redirect URL, we will obtain the OAuth token, which then allows the Portia client to resume. So here you go. Now you can see a step output where the clarification was produced, and now Portia is waiting for the person to authenticate. And this sort of action clarification, this is the method that comes from our CLI execution hub. So let's just click on this and let's authenticate. Conveniently, this came out on another window. Let me bring that back. Here we go. So this is using, again, our, oh, look, you can see me. Hi. This is using our authentication client. Boom. And it is the scope that that is attached to this particular tool. So we're requesting that. So you can see how you can control the scope of your agents using our action clarifications. Now that I've authenticated, you will notice that the good old Portia client is going to receive the OAuth token, put it in our OAuth token store, and you can see that the plan run state is now updated to in progress. There's a mention of the Portia AI dashboard for those of you with feline eyes. We'll look at that in a second. But more importantly, it was able to resume and it was able to execute invoke the send email tool, and it was able to execute it correctly. And I was able to send myself an email that summarizes the headline and confirms that that poor old skeleton was not able to complete its shower operation. But have a look at this, signed by Munir, co-founder of Portia AI. I don't know why I'm surprised that the product is working. I shouldn't be. But yeah, it's pretty cool, right? This is because we have the execution, what do you call it? Sorry, the execution context with that end user specified, and it was picked up. And the email was successfully sent whilst the clarification was resolved, which is pretty neat, right? And just to sort of show you that so that you don't think this is smoke and mirrors, there you go. So here's a brief summary of today's quirky news, and you've got your sort of predicament of the skeleton running out of jet poo in a shower. So there you have it, folks. This was a walkthrough of the core abstractions and how it all comes together. Hopefully you were able to code along, and hopefully I didn't ramble too much and it all made sense. Again, there's actually my second video ever on YouTube, so I probably did 100 things wrong. Please do give me feedback. God knows I need it, and help me figure out how to make those videos more useful for you and what you'd like to hear about next. Thank you for watching, and catch you again soon. Once again, please be remiss if I don't say like and subscribe, and follow the links in the description below to find our GitHub repo and star it, or to navigate to our docs for our examples repo if you wanted to try a few more advanced examples. So voila.